Ja, liebes Publikum, die Experten sind sich einig. Maschinen werden unser Leben nachhaltig verändern und auch die Relevanz von Marken verändern. Eines ist aber bereits heute Tatsache, und zwar, dass das Thema künstliche Intelligenz in einem rasanten Tempo Einzug in unser Privat-, aber insbesondere auch unser Geschäftsleben hält. Was es für einen nachhaltigen und ethischen Umgang mit dieser Technologie braucht und welche konkreten Use Cases dabei funktionieren, das weiß mein nächster Gast. Die Lead Data Consultant bei hlke beschäftigt sich seit mehr als 15 Jahren mit ihrem fundierten Know-how im Bereich maschinellen Lernen, gepaart mit ihrer Passion zum Thema kundenzentrierte Entwicklung von Produkten. Einen herzlichen Applaus für Dr. Lisa Falco.
Dankeschön. Und wenn es für alle okay ist, würde ich jetzt auf Englisch switchen. Das ist für mich ein bisschen einfacher. Französisch wäre es auch möglich, aber ja, wir nehmen Englisch. So thank you so much for being here. And as the panel just discussed, many people are a bit skeptical of AI. And even though most of the talks here today has been about all the amazing possibilities that it will bring us, but people are still slightly skeptical because there are actually risks involved with these new technologies. There has been quite some big screw-ups only since ChatGPT came out. For example, this is one example from Air Canada that had a chatbot, also powered by a large language model, that were giving false advice to their customers. The chatbot told a customer that they could become reimbursed for a certain ticket by sending in all the applications a bit later. When the customer followed that advice, it turned out that was not actually the true advice. The chatbot had given false information, and Air Canada refused to pay out the reimbursement. Then they went to court, and actually Air Canada was held responsible for the information that the false information that the chatbot was giving, and had to reimburse this, and they had to pay for the trial cost. And of course, it's really bad press. This is not something that you want as a brand. Another example is Sports Illustrated. They used AI not only to generate the content, but even generate fake journalists that were posting this content. This is also something that was not popular at all by their readers and was very bad publicity and bad for the brand. Another case is the Samsung employees that realized ChatGPT is an amazing machine to debug your code. So they took IP-protected code from Samsung and copy-pasted it into ChatGPT to get ideas of how they could debug their code. But what happens with ChatGPT is that it takes your data, it retrains your algorithms, and all of a sudden the IP-protected code by Samsung is now available to help everyone asking ChatGPT for advice on coding. And the very last example, a lawyer asking ChatGPT if there are any similar court cases that has happened in the past linked to one of his big cases. And he asked for 2 example court cases for this particular thing he was working on. And ChatGPT generated very confidently 2 other court cases that he happily brought to court, presented in front of everyone. It's just that those had never existed. ChatGPT had made this up. And in the end, his client lost, and of course, the lawyer even lost his license to them. So it comes with new challenges. It comes with new risks. Some of those new risks that we have with those large language models is that they are amazing at making false statements with very high confidence. I mean, the lawyer, he actually went back and asked ChatGPT, are these court cases real? And ChatGPT answered yes. So whether it's a he or a she or an it was very, very confident. It can also generate biased and harmful content. This is because they are trained on basically the entire internet. And as you all know, internet is not this, it's not the perfect environment for everything. There is a lot of sexism, racism, harmful language out there, and all of this is things that ChatGPT and other large language models has been trained on. So it is there, something to really pay attention for. There are also a lot of legal uncertainties now. For example, copyright. There are risks that if you ask ChatGPT to generate a text for you, that it will use copyrighted text and snippets of text in your text generation. And who is responsible for that? It's actually illegal to use copyrighted material. It's been generated by ChatGPT, so who's at fault here? This is still to be determined how this will be dealt with. We don't know exactly how this will be done in the future, but a lot of things will happen here. And of course, misuse. Simply using it for the wrong purposes, generating fake news, fake articles, fake journalists, whatever. There's a lot of issues here as well. And also something that I want you to pay attention to with the examples that I gave you is that it was not the providers of the AI that got into trouble on the New York Times and BBC. It was actually the users that got the problems. So if you as a company leverage AI within your company, you are responsible for how it's being used, and the negative press will come back on to your company as users of these technologies, even if you might not have been the one that actually developed it. So therefore, responsible AI is everyone's business. It's not only the people that develop it. With those words, I don't want to scare you off. I mean, the panel were some skepticism. It's a word of caution. There are, of course, ways to handle this, and this is what I will talk to you about now. So how can you go about making sure that this does not happen to you and to your company? The key is responsible AI. Responsible AI is based on a few core principles. The first one is that it has to be human-centric. That means that it should be respectful and fair towards all affected parties, but also that you have to assign responsibility for the AI to real humans. There always has to be some human to go back to if there's a malfunctioning of your system. It has to be ethical. Ethical means that it needs to respect human rights, but it also means that it needs to be aligned with your company values. And of course, you want to make sure that you don't have any unintended consequences. Very few ethical mishaps comes from bad intent. It's when the technology is not working as they should and something unexpected happens. So this is what you want to really make sure that you have considered. Of course, you need transparency. It's about, you need this to create trust and clarity for all stakeholders, so that people know, for example, that they are dealing with an AI when they're interacting with a chatbot. This will actually soon become the law that you have to provide this as well. And of course, we want it to be sustainable. It's about sustainability in terms of looking at the environmental impact that those large language models are having, which is actually huge. But it's also about ensuring technical robustness of your solution and that the solutions are safe. But how do you take those high-level principles, which are, of course, great to have, and turn it to something concrete that you can actually work with? We have, at hlke, we have our frameworks to do this. These are very concrete checklists that you have to tick off. There are questions that you need to answer. And whenever you buy a system, you have to make sure that these questions are answered, or if you develop it yourself, you have to be the one that actually provides the answers. And this is a kind of high-level overview of what that covers. importantly, it covers 3 different layers because it's about connecting the human to the technology. So we have the human layer, we have the data layer. The panel talked a lot about how important the data is, and we have the model layer, which is the AI itself. On the human layer, it's about looking at the risk. What is the risk that we go in by implementing this or using this solution in our company? What can go wrong? You need to think about this really early on. And you have to be clear, what are the limitations? How good is it? We know Gen AI is hallucinating sometimes. To what extent? To what extent can we trust it? For other AI as well, there is never, today, there's no AI that works 100%. And it's so important that you create this clarity around the limitations. And of course, we mentioned transparency as well and respectful interaction. And you have to actually monitor, how is this being used? For example, just as an example of overtrust, that is what the lawyer did. He trusted so well what ChatGPT was saying that he even lost his license to practice law. On the data track, the panel also talked about the importance of privacy, but it's about also the data that the AI has been trained on. Has it been ethically corrected? Are there any biases in there that we need to pay attention to? Are we being clear towards the end user how the data is being used when they enter the data into the system? And that was, for example, the case with Samsung. They were hopefully not clear about how their data were being used. And of course, when you develop it yourself, you need to look at how the data develop with time, but that's more technical detail. On the model side, you want to make sure there are a lot of things that you need to consider when you actually develop the model. One thing is that you have validated it properly. You have to make sure that at least, even though it doesn't work all the time, that it works 99.9% of the time if it's towards a customer and you have a really big amount of usage, or smaller if the usage is more constrained. And this is validation part is incredibly important and something that Air Canada should have checked a little bit better before releasing their chatbot. All of these things are things that you need to consider when you, even when you buy a solution and use it. But if you actually develop it yourself, it's even more important that you do that. And to do it in the most convenient way so that it's easy for all your engineers to do it, make sure that you map it to your developing process. This is here mapped to the development process that we have at hlke. So you have to ask the right questions at the right moment throughout your whole development. And of course, at all points in your development, in your usage, you need to consider the environmental impact. And that is even for your daily work. For example, if you Google something instead of using ChatGPT, that has a much, much lower footprint, ecological footprint. So please don't do all your Googling, or don't replace all Googling with ChatGPT. That's terribly detrimental for our environment. And also you can try to choose providers, the green providers of those models as well. All of this responsible AI, just some years back, it was a nice to have, something that not everyone cared about, and we had to really try to sell this, why this is important. We don't need to sell this anymore because it will be actually enforced now by the EU AI Act. The EU AI Act was voted through in March this year, and it will successively be integrated during this year and next year. And the key principles between the EU AI Act is that it's going to restrict use cases to protect human rights and well-being. It's going to, and you as a company has to have principles in place to to handle your AI. And also remember, even though you're Swiss companies here, the second you sell something where an EU citizen is involved, is a buyer, or somehow affected by what you do, you will have to comply with EU AI Act. And something very similar will soon come as well. The EU AI Act is based on a risk-based approach. It's all about looking at the risk of the use case, and there are 4 different categories. There are the unacceptable risks. This is about social scoring and biometric categorization of people in public places. This will be prohibited and not allowed. Then there are the high-risk systems, such as medical devices and educational content as well, or CV scanning. This will only be allowed if it's been developed with a quality management system and according to specific procedures. Then there are limited risks, which will be the most of the marketing material, where you will still need these principles, very similar principles to what I showed you today. And then the minimal risk ones, where you also don't need to do so much. And if you don't follow this, you can actually have sanctions up to 35 million or 7% of your revenue. So how should you get started? Well, first of all, we need a leadership commitment. The top management really needs to be the drivers of this. They need to implement an AI policy and have very clear objective and frameworks for how you're going to leverage AI within your company. And you have to define clear roles and responsibilities. It needs to be well integrated into your business. You have to have a continuous monitoring and improvement, and of course comply with all the laws. It might sound a lot, but it doesn't have to be that difficult. And when we've been helping our customers to implement this, we focus on a few core things. It has to be simple. Really, keep it simple. Don't overdo it. If you're not Google or a medical device company, just stick to the easiest possible way to do that. Leverage what you already have. You have a lot of roles and processes in your company already. Just extend a little bit responsibilities for certain of those roles. For example, if you have data governance in place, these are perfect roles to just expand a little bit to also cover AI governance. And it's all about creating clarity and awareness for all your employees. They need to know. They just need to have a few things on their task list, and they need to know where to go with their questions. They need to know how to act in certain situations, and they need to be aware of the risks. These are the main 3 things that you should consider. So that is really my takeaway message. It's not only that responsible AI is a necessity for every company now, but also that just by creating simplicity and clarity, it also does not need to be so difficult. And hopefully it can help you feel more confident in implementing all of these amazing possibilities that AI really brings you as a company. Thank you.
Vielen Dank, Lisa. Ich komme auf diese Seite. Für das spannende Referat. Wir haben abgemacht, die Frage auf Deutsch. Ich hoffe, das passt für dich. Ja, du hast davon gesprochen, dass es viel sein kann, dass es überfordernd sein kann. Du hast aufgezeigt, wo man am besten ansetzen kann, welche Themen relevant sind. Das klingt für mich aber sehr stark danach, dass es auch Ressourcen braucht für diese Themen, damit man die adressieren kann. Was schlägst du Unternehmen vor, die sagen, ja, wir sind sonst schon nicht so wahnsinnig gut besetzt mit Mitarbeiterinnen und Mitarbeitern, sind alle schon voll mit Tasks. Wie geht man das konkret an?
I think one of the important part is really to leverage what you already have. There's a lot of things in place, but of course you have to set in the resources to get in the initial knowledge. But of course, if you choose to use AI, in the end, then it means that you have a good business case for it. You have looked at this would actually bring us value. It costs money to implement it, but there has to be a clear case showing that we will get this money back by increased efficiency, new market segment, better products. Somehow it needs to be a part of a bigger business picture. And the second you have AI, you have to make sure it's of high quality, and that you're not get these unintended consequences, that you don't get, a hit back. So the moment you decide to invest, it's a must. But really try to build on the roles you already have, and upskill your people. The AI Governance itself is not a big investment.
Ja gut, auch schauen, dass irgendwann dieser Return on Invest auch wieder kommt fürs Unternehmen,
Ja.
dass es sich auch auszahlt. Vielen Dank, Lisa, für das spannende Referat.
Danke.